Welcome to the second Austin Sister Cities protocol training in partnership with Austin Community College. Today's protocol training focuses on Asia. We have with us Dr. Kevin Clark from Austin Community College, who will be our facilitator. The training will begin in the next minute, and we request that you hold question and answers to the end of the training, which will be between 12:30 and 12:40. Our next protocol training will be in the summer, in the month of July, and an announcement for that will be sent in the month of June. And with that, Dr. Clark, I hand over to you.
Well, thank you, Aditi, and welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking part of your Friday out here from your Memorial Day weekend. The weather's looking a little better, so I hope you have enjoyed the rest of the weekend after this. Well, let's talk a little bit about business protocol in Asia. Now, one of the things to look at here as we get started is you'll notice that the elements we talk about, of course, you can't cover everything. That's what you take courses for, you read, you go to seminars and workshops. But we want to get the opening act underway here for everyone. And this is true for pretty much for any culture, including people that come to our culture here in Austin. And that is to do some of the basics. The problem is that we are sort of programmed in our own culture to think that things are universal when actually they're not. And one way to start this, if you will, join me here, is to show you a clip from Indiana Jones of an American stereotype of encountering let's just say, a generically Asian culture.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have anything simple, like soup?
What exactly was it they say was stolen?
A sacred rock.
You see, Captain? A rock.
So there we go. Very generic. Of course, the time is a little generic. It goes back decades as well. So what we want to do here is we'll see in some ways the way Asian culture itself can be different than we expect here in Austin, but also how it differs in 5 different places. So today we're going to take a look at China, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and India. Now, I have it divided for each into just some fun facts to get us started. And then our 4 elements that are the initial contact with other people in other cultures, which are greetings, meetings, dining, and refining. Now, again, there's many things, but the point is if you can kind of follow along in the beginning, you can at least get in the door, if not the literal door, of course, the figurative door of getting along with people in the culture. And that is a way to open yourself up to being on the inside a little bit. Of course, along the way, as we look at these, do keep in mind that you do not have to be the first person at the table for dining or the first person in line to greet your, say, your Chinese counterparts. You can follow suit as well, but at least you'll understand what actually is going on as you meet your counterparts. So let's go ahead and get started with China. Just a few fun facts. Soccer was invented in China 2,200 years ago. There's a struggle, of course, in the US between whether we call soccer football because we already have football, but it actually goes back quite a long way. Another is that China, even though if you use the universal time zone, it actually only has one time zone based in the time in Beijing. So, of course, it can be very confusing, even though there's 5 actual time zones in terms of the sun. Technically, officially, there's only one. And and I double checked this, according to the elderly rights law, it's illegal if you're an adult not to visit your parents if they're over 60 on a regular basis. Now, it turns out what counts as a regular basis is in contention, but it is put out there and it is part of the culture as well to respect your elders. So let's talk about the first thing is simply greetings and handshakes. Now, this is something we take to be universal. sort of a modern global culture sort of adapts particularly Western ways, but it can be a little different. And if it's a little bit off, it feels off, and it doesn't. It's not a good first step in the right direction. So at a first meeting, everyone shakes hands with everyone else. So keep in mind, if that means if there are 8 Chinese counterparts and 8 of you from Austin, that's 64 handshakes. But this is typical to get the ball rolling. You only do it once. But everyone shakes everyone else's hand. The second part of that is seniority. Usually, the handshakes are ordered in terms of who is the senior person. And of course, senior can mean 2 different things, right? The senior person in the company and also the oldest person. That's actually good unless you are the senior person, because you can follow suit and watch what other people do. And that works pretty well. That's not unlike American culture, of course, because the CEO or the president of the company, the leader in the group, will probably be the first person, therefore shaking hands with the leader of the other group. Now, there's also the idea of applause, because let's say you're going to do a presentation, you walk in the room, even if you haven't met everyone, you'll still get an applause to get you started, hopefully at the end as well. And that's very similar to what we do right here in Austin, right here in the United States. So don't be surprised. You may not know who everyone in the room is, but there really won't be time when you're doing the presentation. Another issue is touch. The Chinese are particularly practiced in de-escalating formality. So after that initial handshake, later, if you get to know a counterpart well, it is appropriate to touch on the back, particularly the shoulder, which actually in Western culture is the one acceptable area, as long as you're clothed, is on the shoulder. It doesn't imply intimacy of any sort. And it's touch in confirmation of the actual verbal greetings as well. But this only applies to men, so men only touch other men on the shoulder. I think in here, what I found is that women can do that with women, but not men and women. Okay, now one that if you are in a very rare situation of being there for Chinese New Year, which I understand is quite a good time, there is an ancient custom of the fist and palm salute. Generally, for men, it's placing the left hand over the top of the right hand, and for women, it's the reverse, right hand over the top of the left hand. And you'll see it occasionally ceremonial. So even if you don't do that, if you happen to be there during this time and you see this, you won't be surprised. And here's a nice video to take us there a little bit to see how this works in ceremony.
新的一年，好事连连，牛气冲天。祝所有的朋友们牛年平平安安，收获满满。
给大家拜年了。
There we go. That's good. So you probably won't partake in that, except on a very rare occasion, but you'll at least know what is going on there, an ancient tradition that is preserved in the new year. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about titles here. Of course, this is your sort of spoken or oral calling card to the person you're meeting, and you'll be introduced with your title, your surname or first name and surname, or given name and surname, and your position. So most common for men would be Mr. or Doctor. Less common are titles such as Master or Teacher. I think this may be most equivalent to in German, that you may be introduced to a professor. They say Herr Professor. For us, it would sound like Mr. Professor, a double title. But it just shows what you sort of do rather than simply credentials. So you'll be introduced as Mr. Eric Jones, General Manager of American Electro Vehicles. So we know your credentialed title, your first and last name, and then who you work for. It could be, you're in a line of people meeting. Again, we're back to our line here, and you may work for different companies. So if you're all from American Electro Vehicles, of course, you would just say, please meet Mr. Eric Jones, the general manager. And you would you would dispense with having to say the name of the company. For women, of course, this is an issue, the US versus a lot of the rest of the world, that we have basically switched to 3 titles, Mr., Ms., and Doctor, generally, that cross regardless of what company or organization. But in Chinese, often you still say Mrs. It's kind of like equivalent in America of saying ma'am. Now, if you say ma'am to a woman who is 16, it sounds a little odd because you'd probably say miss. But the point is that Mrs. in Chinese, like we say ma'am, is not really a marker of marriage, but a marker of age. If someone is old enough to be married, then they are referred to as Mrs. So you want to err on the side of Mrs. And also less common, they also have master or teacher. So you might say, please meet Mrs. Olivia Smith, CEO of Oregon Furniture Manufacturing. There's not really a Ms. equivalent, so you err on the side of respect for someone senior, someone older, and someone assumed to be, if not married, of marrying age, is Mrs. Of course, one thing people do forget is that in Chinese, the surname, which we usually call last name, the family name comes first, and then the given name, or what we call the first name. So you might see someone say Mr. Zhang Wei, and so you would refer to him as Mr. Zhang because that is the surname. And later, of course, as they de-escalate formality at some point in a meeting, or an individual may say, please call me Wei. And you can return the favor, of course. You allow the de-escalation of formality because you don't want to be overly familiar, and you can say, okay, Wei, nice to meet you again, and please call me John. And then you're down that level. So the thing is, you have to start with formality before you go to informality. You have to start with last name and title, then first name, because you can't really do it in reverse. You can't, once the genie's out of the bottle, as the expression used to go, you can't put it back in, right? You can't start informal and move to formal. So it's a sign of respect to begin with the formality. Let's talk a little bit about attire. China does follow a rather westernized path of what you see here: sport coats and ties, slacks or khakis, open neck shirts without coats and ties in summer. Sounds like Austin a little bit. It could be this week in Austin. Women tend to wear dresses and pantsuits, so that there is sort of almost a non-gendered element, as we see in the photo here. You want to avoid heavy makeup and dangling jewelry. That's for evening wear and that sort of thing. Now, there is some indication internationally, as I point out in our trainings, is that we may be moving to a culture more where ties are worn less and pocket squares take the place of a flash of color. It's a little bit of silk or cotton in the left-hand pocket, and it's a little more comfortable. But you want to err on the side of formality. So if you're not sure, you do wear a tie. You can check around. If it's okay to wear an open collared shirt with a jacket, sport jacket, or a dress coat, and a pocket square, that may work just fine. But the pocket square is a step down in formality, so you want to check first. Okay. Gift giving is very important in China. It's a big part of Chinese culture, including business meetings. So you would, if you meet with your host or hostess in their home, you do want to bring gifts. We, of course, do the same right here in the United States. It can be chocolates or brandy. And you give gifts in the sequence of introduction. There'd be more expensive items, of course, for the leader of that group. And you can also bring Western gifts such as cigarettes, liquor, desk items, and books. As we're going to see in just a moment, smoking is more a part of Chinese culture. I think generally there's not a case unless you work for a tobacco company that you would present cigarettes. But on the other hand, expensive cigars in certain cases are acceptable in the US, right? So this should not be a surprise. Some things to avoid are black and white items, which can symbolize tragedy or death. Color is very important. Okay. Let's see here. And just a quick reminder here, there are things you can look up, of course. That's the point of this, not to really go over these. But you have to be aware of things that of certain colors, certain numbers, and certain homophones. Like you see the pair here. Sharing a pair is a homophone, separate. So they sound the same in Chinese. So it suggests you want to separate from them. You have to be very careful that there's not some symbolism in what you are giving someone, including umbrellas, fans, shoes, and a clock, etc. Be very careful about that. Those are the things you want to look up because they do change sometimes, but they tend to be pretty traditional. Okay, now when you actually get to a meeting, this is after greetings, you want to make sure that you keep up with how every culture has a different sense of time. You want to be there on time because being late is considered rude. Of course, here's the deal. You may not be near the meeting site. You know, you can always get somewhere early and be in an ante room, a waiting room, etc. As we're here today, of course. All the better, especially if it's hot. You don't want to confuse flop sweat with nerve sweat, right? That's a good thing. When I teach public speaking, I point that out. You know, it's going to get hot on some days, or maybe traffic is bad that day. Better to be early, even if you're not in the room early, you're outside the room. You want to prepare for long meetings. Sometimes they could last 10 days or more. There may be periods of silence. We tend as Americans to want things to progress very quickly. Let's fly in on a Monday and fly out on Thursday, but it may not work that way with your Chinese counterparts. And realize that you don't just get someone signing on the dotted line, that a signed deal is still open to negotiation. So it's a longer process. You have to have a different sense of time. Okay, now we are in an odd world here right now. It's a transitional part of our world, being in a pandemic and being online and being more electronic about business cards. But printed business cards are still exchanged in business meetings. You probably want cards in English on one side and Chinese on the other, just in case. They can use either. If you're getting them printed somewhere, of course, you do want to make sure translations are quite accurate. And you give the card using both hands with the card facing the recipient. So when you hand it to them, they can immediately read it. And you can hold the cards to study them, even if you don't really want to look at them right then, to show that you're not dismissing the card, which is like dismissing the person. And you can put them in your card case or nearby table. I'll tell you, when I've been to meetings, I always bring a little card case. One is for your own cards, if you can manage two, and one is to put cards in. That way they don't get bent and you don't lose them and they're in one place. You won't get it confused with the receipt later. Now, this is still basically true. I will tell you, just the other day, I was in a store and I didn't really have time to look at everything. I was like, well, do you have a business card? And I was handed one and it was perforated, which was something from about 10 or 15 years ago when you print them at home. It doesn't really give a lot of confidence in the business. This is an area you don't want to go inexpensive on, right? Get the best cards you can, because that is often, after the greeting in the meeting, your second foot forward. Say your first foot. This is your second foot. Make sure it looks nice. Now, it could look something like this. This person is from Australia. You'll see it's in English and in Chinese, and it's printed both ways. Plus, of course, it has a QR code. That way, if somebody wants to scan it, they can, but they don't have to do it in the moment, right? They can do it later if they like. And this is the way it's a physical manifestation of the meeting. Oh, of course, in all of this, if you feel it, that will help if you know some Chinese, to make sure to hire an interpreter. And of course, be careful if everyone is speaking Mandarin and the interpreter speaks Cantonese, that's going to be a problem. Okay. Now, just a few more things about saving face. Now, I teach sections on intercultural relations, and one of the things has to do with untranslatable words that don't quite have an equivalent in English. One of them is, if I have this correct, miazu, which means saving face. It's the closest thing in English, but it's a particularly larger thing in Asian culture, and in particularly Chinese culture, is that you show self-control and strength of character. You're professional. etc. And you're even if you are the poorest person or the richest person, the most powerful person, the least powerful person, saving face is all important. So if you're even in a shop, you never insult a shopkeeper, etc. Because saving face is a fundamental part of Chinese culture. So be respectful, show self-control, etc. I would argue maybe the opposite in American culture at the moment is the Karen me of not, you can complain to a staff member or a manager, but to go overboard with it shows a lack of saving face for the shopkeeper. Okay, now dining, of course, this is very important because you're likely to have a business meeting at some point that involves a meal. Cultures around the world use food and dining together as a way to bond. Now, I'd like to point out for this, as with any culture, remember that dining is not really to gain nourishment. I mean, it is. But the point of it is that it originally was that because if you're willing to break bread with someone, to share a piece of your bread with someone else, it says, I trust you, I hope you trust me. The same reason we began shaking hands to show we don't have any concealed weapons. But now it's more symbolic. So if I may suggest, if you're at all concerned with the process, you might want to have a little snack before you head out so that you're not there just to be ravenously eating, because that is not why you're there. It might even involve things like a 12-course banquet. Arrive exactly on time, never early. If you arrive early, it means quick. Can you serve me? I'm hungry. And then you're not really there for the right reason. So be there on time and not early. You can be there alone or with the secretary, but generally in business meetings, unless it's at someone's house and that sort of thing where you'll be told, it's not with a spouse. It's not with a personal associate. It's with a business associate. You can sit and you eat after the host has begun, not unlike a more formal setting in America. The person at the head of the table begins. Because if you start eating again, it looks like you're hungry, no matter how hungry you are. And I tell you, I've been to a meeting before. We didn't eat for an hour and a half. That's why you have a snack before you go. And you can certainly reciprocate at the end of the visit, invite everyone, even if it is kind of a sort of a passive invite of, please, we must all meet again ourselves, and I'll, as you're going to be the host. Okay, now let's talk about toasting. Alcohol is a big part of Chinese culture when it comes to alcohol the same with dining in terms of, and that's why I call it toasting and not drinking. This is not about the actual consumption of alcohol. It is about how alcohol is used for ceremonial purposes. You can be prepared to toast after the first course, etc. There'll be more than one toast. So if you get to make a toast, that would be nice as well. You're following suit. And you say ganbai, bottoms up. It's usually a shot glass. I'm afraid these are a little full in this photo here, but nonetheless, they're not large glasses. And you always drink. It's insulting not to drink, even though it may be only a thimbleful. It's ceremonial. Maybe it's a third or a half of a shot in America. If for some reason you can't drink, maybe you have certain reasons you can't. You could be an alcoholic. You simply don't want to keep your head about you. You can give a reason and it will be accepted. Need to drive. Because simply not to drink the drink handed to you would be considered insulting. Okay, so let's take a look here at all the ways. The best way I can share this in a quick, really good video of all the ways that shot glasses for toasting may be used in a Chinese business setting.
我干了，你随意啊。
水战鼓擂，今年喝酒谁怕谁？
女人端一杯，男人哪能推？干了！
老于喝，
谢。
哎，老于来吃啊，自罚3杯啊！老于前2天去见人家没叫我，该罚啊！老板明天要出差，我来喝。我年轻，让我锻炼锻炼。
哎，我媳妇儿管得严，不能喝。
So there we see. Now, some of that transfers into similarities in American culture. It is rude to do a toast and not complete the full drink. You don't sip a little and put it down because it doesn't complete the toast. But also one thing that's simply universal about human beings and their biology is you do want to be careful and pace yourself, do the best you can, because to use another culture's proverb in Russian, there's the expression, once the words come out of your mouth, you can't eat them again. You got to be careful because you don't want to say or do something that would embarrass you later or your organization. Be very careful about that. It's, well, the rule of thumb is to be, shall we say, the least drunk person in the room. That would help if you can manage to do that. Okay. Now, another aspect here, we're not going to see so much in other cultures, and including other Asian cultures, is the aspect of smoking. It is a part of any informal Chinese gathering of men. It generally does not include women. This goes back to an American expression about decisions made in a smoke-filled room. Usually it's men with cigars in a country club kind of thing, and then it excludes other people, including women. But it's considered polite to accept a cigarette. It's always from a senior person to a junior person, or to the host to the guest. And to follow up, you would use your hand to shield the lighter. Now, let's say you don't smoke. It's a little harder to fake than not to drink or drink so much. You give a very clear reason. It's better that I don't smoke because my doctor says I can't. You're saying I appreciate the effort, I appreciate the act, but I simply can't because of outside forces. That way you're being polite and you refused it for good reason and you're around, but you will be around people who are smoking. Okay, now finally, some aspects about dining in terms of toast, the utensils and the order. Let's see, if there's something you don't eat, you can refuse it. You can say, I don't eat meat. You can say I'm a vegetarian, or again, you can blame it on medicine and say, my doctor says I can't have any more carbs. In other words, it looks delicious, but I simply can't. It's not unlike here. If somebody refuses your dish, it's implying that you don't accept their hospitality, or if it's at their house, you don't accept their ability as a chef. Some things a little different. You want to slurp and belch your soup, or not, slurp your soup and belch, because that implies that it's quite delicious. Now, that is the absolute opposite of what we learned in the US. You have to be as delicate as possible. The spoon on the opposite side of the bowl. You don't fill it completely, etc., and you certainly never belch. You rest the chopsticks on the table, or a chopstick rest when you're finished. A few quick tips. You do belch, you do arrive on time. There's no tipping, and you don't finish all of your food, because if you finish it all, it looks as if you really were expecting seconds of it to receive them. It also looks like you were there for nourishment rather than the social aspects. You should never look like you're starving, that you're that hungry. Okay, so let's just look at a Chinese setting here, if you would. And we'll see some of the aspects in action with Americans as they are in China.
I'm working my way through the Chinese lunar solar calendar with all its festivals and celebrations. And where there's a festival, there will always be a meal. As I've been invited to various celebrations, I wanted to start by learning my manners. I've asked Sharon Schweitzer, author of the multicultural guide Access to Asia, to lend a hand. My husband Bosco is joining me, along with 2 young women we know from back home, Emma and Michaela.
So,
Sharon, we're all looking at that. Now, what do we do?
Well, as the host, it's my obligation to serve. Provide one of those to you.
Do we self-condiment or do you condiment?
Self-condiment.
Okay.
They're so deliciously looking. Look at that.
The 2 sets of chopsticks. The one that was in your napkin is for you.
Yes.
The one here is, this extra set is for you to use to help serve the people on your right and left. But you would not use these chopsticks to put in the dish. And you always serve from the Lazy Susan.
So this dish never gets picked up, but you can pick up your dish.
Yes.
Yeah.
So shall we?
Of course. Emma, why did you want to come and learn about the whole etiquette thing?
I'm actually studying here, so I'm going to all these local places, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I just wanted to make sure I'm not embarrassing myself.
Oh, look at that. Oh, see, that's so important because that whole idea of even just who's going to pay is so...
It can get stressful.
It can get totally stressful.
This looks amazing.
So as the host, what are your obligations?
Pour drinks for our guests. We also serve our guests, and we just make sure our guests are comfortable. We also take care of the bill discreetly.
Oh, see, that's a good thing.
What happens is they will take care of the bill out of sight. You shouldn't even see that happen.
Shall we turn it around? Love the leaf.
I do too. Isn't this beautiful?
Wow.
So where are you supposed to put your chopsticks when you put them down? Just across the
Across,
plate?
yes.
Okay.
Across diagonal.
Would that be rude if they were just kind of on half on the plate?
If they're leaning?
That would not be ideal.
Okay.
The best.
Michaela.
Got it. If they had chopstick rests, would put them there. Since they don't, you want to put them up to the side.
I have a question regarding the taking the photographs of the food.
I would ask the host if it's all right. And most of them are going to be very flattered that you enjoy the food that much.
So am I allowed to take a photo?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
How would the server know who is at the head of the table, who's the host, or head of the table might even be a Western term?
The server would know the guest of honors to the right of the host.
Okay.
And the server will know who the host is because they've made the arrangements. And whoever extended the invitation is the host.
And then whoever extending the invitation is paying also.
In Asia, there's no going Dutch. You know, there's no going Dutch
now
in Asia.
you're talking.
I've noticed that. It's hard to split bills. I actually sort of lauged at when I asked to split a bill with my friend,
Oh, well,
Is that
you know
rude?
why? Here's why. Because there's what's called guanxi, or there's reciprocity. So your friend took you out, and you had dinner with your friend. Well, next time it's your turn.
Oh.
So this is our crispy boneless duck. We can wrap it
Nice.
on a pancake, everything together.
Oh, look at how
beautiful they are.
that is gorgeous.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
You know, historically in China, you never used your hands for anything.
Right.
And everything was the chopstick or the spoon.
Yes.
But as we all know, there are modern manners. Once you put the duck in your pancake, you
Then
can
you can-
actually pick it up with your hands.
See, it's looking up for me now.
It's
Now
looking up for you.
up.
You're liking that, aren't you?
I'm liking that. Otherwise, now what does that mean?
That is
demerits
okay.
your
See,
pain.
now, as a host, I am going to reach right over there, and I'm going to help him with my communal chopstick.
See, she just saved you.
All of them.
There you are. If you can't use chopsticks, don't ask for a fork. You will so entertain your host. If you really struggle and try to use the chopstick, just go ahead and struggle.
Chinese manners trace all the way back to my foodie friend Confucius. Eating etiquette was originally derived from ancient worship rituals and came into practice earlier than any other etiquette system in imperial China. It was encouraged by Confucianism because it was said to help rule the country and educate its people. Knowing what to do at table makes it a lot more comfortable to attend a banquet. And I've gotten one of the most coveted invitations of the New Year season.
There. So there we go. You're not going to remember all of this, right? You can follow the lead of someone else, especially not only your Chinese host or other Chinese guests there, but also the other Americans in group. If they're more familiar, you just follow suit. Just don't go hungry, so you have time to watch what's going on. Okay. Now, last thing is some refining is how women and business work there. China is still a male-dominated society, although its communist system aims for sexual equity. This comes in part from probably from a Confucianist past that honors authority, but also is tend to be patriarchal, that sort of thing. But you can include women in negotiating teams, and they can go along without a spouse. And generally, women avoid definitely smoking and usually drinking, but Western women are allowed to do so. Okay, good. Now, if you would, let's move on to Taiwan. So China's neighbor, some similarities, but also some differences here. Some quick facts. I have a friend who lives in Taipei, and I did check on these, by the way, after I found these, and these are true. Rather than leaving your garbage pails outside, you wait for Elise or some song to be played, and that's when you bring your trash out. So you never see trash cans on the street. Another thing is, I asked my friend, what is one food that he doesn't care for, and it is this one. It is stinky. He loves tofu, but he doesn't like stinky tofu. And it's sold on the street because it smells so much. People don't generally keep it in their houses. And the third thing is that Taiwan is ethnically Chinese because of a 200-year dynasty, but there's still 500,000 indigenous people there from various tribal groups, including often a language that they just call Taiwanese. And in fact, I was checking on my international radio stations. You can actually listen to Taiwanese stations in indigenous languages. Okay, so what's different here? The Taiwanese value work friendliness, and they're focused on the family. They may bow their heads slightly for first meetings and then use handshakes, but only for male friends. And you, again, like in China, allow a third person to introduce you. By the way, this is true in America as well, right? If there are 3 people, one knows 2 of them. It's generally, especially in the South, you don't introduce yourself to the person you don't know. You wait for the host to do it. And technically, you're not even really supposed to talk to them until you've been introduced. So that won't be a problem because someone will introduce the 2 that don't know each other. Gift giving is common. You present the gift with both hands, but you don't open it in front of the giver because there's the unfortunate side effect of being disappointed or overly surprised by the gift. So you see here, it's probably a bottle, I'm guessing of a liqueur, some sort of liqueur, but it's in a nice velvet bag. It's okay for the recipient to refuse to give, but the giver will persist until it's accepted, and that's considered a compliment. And you would exchange a gift of equal value. Likewise, as we saw in China, meetings are more formal, but less formal than in mainland culture. You might think of Taiwan as a literal and figurative stepping stone between the West or the United States and China in terms of it being a little bit more Americanized in its approach. For example, you should be on time, but a little late is, or a little early is okay. And of course, that means aim for early because you never know if you missed the one subway stop or something and it made you late. So be early. You can always sit outside, look over your notes, check your messages, or take a breath. Again, business cards in English and in Chinese. And Taiwanese negotiators set the pace of the meeting, so you follow their lead. Entertaining is vital for business. Again, at banquets may even have 20 courses. But of course, a course may mean one small thing and then another small thing, whereas for us, it may be all set on a table like a feast. Their feast is time-based, not space-based, if you might say. It's not a full table necessarily, but with smaller table, more people, course after course is brought. Course is brought, one's taken away, a new one's brought in. There's toast before and after meals with wine or liquor, not unlike in the US or somewhat in China. Again, always leave a little rice in the bowl of food on your plate to show that, gosh, you didn't bring me seconds and I was starving. Also, when it looks like you're starving, it looks like you're eating to fill your stomach and not because it is a wonderful social practice. Of course, place chopsticks on the table or chopstick rest. I will tell you, I have my own chopstick rests because that way you're less likely also to stain the table with soy sauce, for example. Women may generally conduct business in Taiwan in probably a more fluid manner than in mainland China. You have to be patient with businessmen to accept women in business positions. It's okay to be invited to business dinners, but not to after dinner entertainment. That could get to be a problem and it could be misinterpreted. Okay, if you would please, let's move to South Korea. By the way, I note sometimes you'll see even manufacturers like for Hyundai, I think it's called Korean Motor Works or something. We have to be very careful, by the way, because North Korea has a very different culture these days. A lot of things are different. So I do want to make sure to say here, this is South Korean, not simply Korean, even though it's based in pre-1950s long-term Korean culture, right? There is a split in the road here. Well, some fun facts. At least 20% of South Korean males use makeup. There's almost $1 billion industry. I was just in an island in the Pacific last week, and it's funny, there was even a K-pop store, and there was some makeup. It's kind of interesting. Another one is jaywalking is very uncommon because people will follow a procedure and stay on their side of the crosswalk until the light turns green. They don't try to dash across the road. And another thing is, of course, you may know this, still the most viewed video in history is Gangnam Style by ASCI. It's the most watched video. It's early on in the short video revolution. Okay, so let's talk about greetings here. In South Korea, they use both a traditional bow and a handshake, and it might be the right hand supporting the forearm. And you kind of have to watch this because this is where clashes can occur. You're not sure whether to bow or shake hands. Now, I talk to other Americans when they travel, and they find that when they're in a bowing culture, they just start doing it instinctively. For one thing, it doesn't require any knowledge of the language, but you want to make sure you do it in the right place. Now, similar to China and Taiwan, you dress semi-formally with business suit and tie, and women should avoid tight skirts. So you dress in a business manner. You address with Mr., Mrs., or Miss, plus a surname and a shared name. So it actually is in three layers of names here. So you have to be careful that, of course, the surname comes first. So be careful how they want to be addressed, and always address most formally until asked to do it informally. You give gifts with reciprocal value with both hands and use brightly wrapped paper, but never red. Make sure it's better with yellow and green stripes. You can always look it up if you get confused between the cultures, because if it's the wrong color, it doesn't matter what the gift is because it may be seen as insulting. I mean, we can imagine that too. If you went to someone's house and you gave them a gift wrapped in black paper, for example, it would look very odd. Koreans do expect punctuality. There's some room for delay. Again, just go early. If you have to wait outside the room, fine. You can cool off, get your bearings, think about what you want to say, and just take a breath. Again, you present business cards with both hands facing the recipient. First meetings are to establish trust. There's usually no discussion of business. We could say that can be an American thing, especially in the South. We want to get to know who our counterparts are before we make any decisions. Yes is not always yes, but instead of no, use questions that don't use yes, no responses. Those are closed questions. Do you agree to this? That's yes or no. You'll avoid it and say, how would you like to proceed? Again, dining is essential for developing social relations that, again, lead to business dealings. Um, you do pour your own drink, but not others, and you accept invitations for drinks after dinner. Now, this is very important. In some cultures, you always allow the other person to pour the drink. You have to be careful. This is very symbolic. It has nothing to do with the alcohol. It has to do with the toasting itself. It's not drinking, it's toasting. Allow the host to seat you and pay the bill. And generally, we know that too. If somebody is the host, they host you, they are paying for it just the same as if it were in their own home and they cook for you. They're not expecting you to bring dishes. That's a very informal thing, even here in the US, potluck, but that does not happen in South Korea. Pass food to the right, I believe that's the tradition in formal dining in the US as well. Just some quick etiquette. Wait for the oldest person to lift their spoon first. We do that too. Wait for the host. You don't go first. It implies you're hungry. It implies that you're there for nourishment and not for the social activity of eating. Some of these can be a little funny. I found this one because don't ever blow your nose during a meal, even if it's running. So I suppose you would have to excuse yourself. And don't lift your bowl off the table, etc. Don't reach across the table, and don't use your hands to pick food. Now, some of these are simply transferred into an American sort of style as well. There's a formality. Again, you're not sure. Somebody else is going to do it first. You can watch what they do. Okay, women in business. Some Western women may have problems conducting business in South Korea. You can shake hands with a South Korean man, but not a woman. Now, these things you really have to check. Male, female, female, male, 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 female, female. Really, this varies in cultures. And in the US, until recently, a woman had to present her hand first to a man. And that's no longer true, of course. There's absolutely no difference, male and female. But because of that, we get used to it and we make sure what the process is in that culture. Act elegant, refined, and feminine without loud talking. And this one may be the worst of this, or the oddest for you to see, but generally you wait for a South Korean man to speak or act first. Okay, now if you would, let's go ahead to Japan. Some fun facts. Japan has the highest number of vending machines in the world, and they sell all kinds of odd things here. I thought the funniest one here was dog wigs. And if you've been to Japan, you know this. Even an alley between two small streets will have a whole row of vending machines, and you can get absolutely anything. Another is it has one of the world's lowest crime rates, low homicide rate. You'll notice the most common ones are stealing bikes or umbrellas. And I think it's because of the way we don't see bicycles this way, but umbrellas. Umbrellas are meant to flow into the world. If you leave it, somebody else uses it. You find one, you use it. It's not really seen as personal property in the same way. So it is stealing technically, but not unlike the way we see using umbrellas. And finally, cleaning is a part of education in many schools, so they have their own work details, including cleaning toilets. All right, so let's take a look at attire. Men wear black, charcoal, or navy suits, a white shirt and a tie. That's like in the US, except, of course, we more often have colored shirts and more variations on tie. You can unbutton the jacket during a meeting. Women wear pants or skirts, no more than 4 inches above the knee, in pale or white colors. Again, this may be shifting. Japan may be the last to accept this, however, compared to some cultures, of an open shirt and a pocket square. Even post-pandemic, face masks were common. Even outside, I can tell you, I was just in the Pacific last week, and there are a lot of Japanese people, and a lot of the signs are in Japanese. I still saw a lot of face masks. Do shake hands softly and briefly, not unlike in the US, right? You want to make sure it's the right pressure and the right time, right? It's practically a language in itself. Don't shake with both hands. Don't cup or squeeze the other person's hand. But notice here, don't make much eye contact. This is tough for Americans because we consider it less trustworthy if somebody doesn't look you in the eye when you're shaking their hand and being introduced. It's more deferential in Japan than in the US. So you have to be careful. Again, watch how other people do it. Of course, you don't shake hands and bow at the same time. Um, here is President Obama meeting the emperor. He may be forgiven. And after all, it's the effort that counts, not that you get it right. It means that you're not expecting everyone to bow, so to speak, to your culture. Here, he wanted to do a little bit of both. And you see it's a bit awkward, but it's appreciated, therefore the smiles. Okay. Now, bowing has remained in Japan, and it is a formal process. You bow when you keep your arms on the side of your torso and keeping your hands in front of your lower belly. So you simply don't bend over. You have to get it at the right angle. Now you notice a casual bow, a very quick one, is not very far down, and a very formal one is there. But we want to look at the middle one at 30 degrees. So you might look at it as, having your torso parallel to the ground. Go about a third of that. And this is for Americans too. Americans are expected to do this. When you greet clients, you enter meetings and during interactions. The nice thing is it doesn't require any contact, and you can do it to multiple people in quick succession, and they don't have to be right in front of you. That's the nice thing about that. Okay, now you do an exchange, again, business cards while bowing with both hands. With the Japanese side on top, if you have the other side in English, you include your title and rank so the negotiating partner is evident, because they want to know, they may forget what is the hierarchy there. It's always better to have more information than less. So credentials, your title, the company, everything needed on there without it being personal information, right? Never a personal street address, but a business address. You place cards on the table during the meeting, and you preserve them. You don't bend to write on them. If you want to take notes, you do it on a notepad or take a picture with your phone. Because bending the card or defacing it is a way of bending or defacing the other person. It represents the person. Okay, so of course, here it is. You want it double-sided, Japanese on one side, English on the other. Make sure to get it says a phone and machine translate to English. You want to be very careful that you get the translation correct. That would be bad. Any reputable business card maker will make sure it is done correctly, but check and double check. Okay. Now, of course, sometimes there are QR codes, though there seems to be a trend post-pandemic that QR codes, because we had them for everything, like even like menus, are becoming less popular. There's a little bit of burnout. So you can allow for a QR code, but there's nothing wrong with having you see here that QR code leads to an image of the business card, but there's nothing wrong with having all your bases covered. Somebody can scan it if they want. We saw earlier, there's nothing wrong, for example, with having the QR code right on the business card if there's room. Okay, so because there are more nonverbals that are specific to Japan, I thought a quick video might be nice here.
私おいでこっちいやいやいやいやいや12345678910ピース 丸×
So there we go. Those are kind of hard to talk about without actually seeing. And I thought particularly the one about come here looks like go away in English when you use your hand. It's kind of dismissive. You have to be very careful about that. But often, of course, nonverbals go with verbals. That is, words actually spoken. And you'll see how those go together. Again, you can watch other people. It's okay to make mistakes because the point is that you're trying, and that shows a respect for the culture. Okay, gifts from Austin to take to Japan, as well as gifts for Japanese visitors to take back to Japan. These are things you could consider. You could get things from well-known stores like Costco, but also things like Lamb's Candies. That's something right here in Austin. I will say, when I visited Japan, the wife of the person I knew there presented me with a box of strawberry candies. Now, maybe you've seen those before, but here's the interesting thing. It was 3 different kinds of strawberries, so 3 different flavors. Quite unique and quite a wonderful gift, and very much a gift from Japan and not just of any kind of candy. You might want to set up in advance gifts for your Japanese colleagues to take back, so you're not rushing around the airport and making poor, rushed decisions. For more established relationships, you might want to bring slightly more expensive gifts like whiskey. Of course, you can get that in the airport, and probably duty-free, and things like Austin FC shirts, because it is about soccer. I mean, I even know my little cousin who lives elsewhere in the U.S. plays soccer, and that's his favorite gift ever, is an Austin FC t-shirt. Okay, meetings. Be on time means 10 minutes early. It's much more formal than we've seen in China, Taiwan, or South Korea. So 10 minutes early is on time, and being on time is late. You get the point. So maybe be 20 minutes early and sit outside for 10 minutes. Recognize that works in group with hierarchical structures, with older over younger, male over female, senior over junior. They're certainly not the sort of generic, everyone's in the same group as we see in the US, right? Hierarchies are very important. Now, here's the thing that Americans would never believe could be true, but I want you to notice here that falling asleep shows commitment, because you're so tired. You haven't left the meeting, you fell asleep because you couldn't help it, but you're still in the meeting. Now, we would consider it an insult, but there it is considered. It's considered a compliment because you're showing commitment. Okay, let's talk about dining. It's vital for business relationships. Keep your glass partially filled to avoid refills. That is, you don't want to overdrink, so don't drink it all the way down. Again, anytime a plate or a glass is empty, it's implying I'm really hungry and thirsty and I need something quick. And then it becomes about the food or drink and not about the social nature of it. I wish I could think of a word for toasting, for drinking, that we could say with eating. Maybe that's what dining really is. It's the social aspect of consuming food. Of course, wait for the host, as we do in the US. And it's okay, and it's complimentary to pour your companion's glass and allow yours to be filled. I think we do that too if you've had, well, let's just say, some sake at the table. Pour some for your friend. You know, check to make sure they want it, and you pour it, and that's a compliment. You can always request dietary restrictions, say you're vegetarian or gluten-free, in advance. You can give a reason why you don't eat certain things. You can say I'm diabetic or I have celiac disease and that sort of thing. You can be direct. But accept that some items can't be easily replaced. Maybe no meat as a separate thing with rice, but if it's in the sauce, you can. It's kind of like in a bolognese sauce with your spaghetti. You can't really take meat out. You just have to have a different sauce or no sauce. So pouring drinks, you don't pour for yourself. You do pour for your companion and they pour for you. One way to do it is to hold your arm or sleeve with the left hand as we see here and pour with your right hand. It's showing what's kind of heavy. I got a lot to pour here, but I'm going to hold my arm up. And be aware, as we saw in China, that your Japanese counterparts may drink more than Americans. Pace yourself. You want to be the least, shall we say, inebriated person in the room, and to keep your wits about you. Of course, don't play with your chopsticks. Don't pass food from one set to another. Don't rub them together. And of course, you never put them straight up in rice because it is funereal. So you never do that. You put them, you rest them horizontally on the table or on a rest. And another aspect you'll find from our Scandinavian counterparts is that you do take off your shoes. You find out where they go. There's already going to be shoes there. You don't have to worry. And you should have shoes that come off easily. We see ads for that now. There's Skechers, etc. It's very interesting if you're at that level. It shouldn't be complicated. If you got a lot of laces on boots, that's going to be a problem. Make sure you check your socks. You probably already did this because you were in the airport, weren't you? You had to take your shoes off and you realize what you were wearing underneath, because those socks are going to be visible for some time in your host's house. Just a few quick things. Just particulars that may differ from one culture to another. We saw in some, you don't lift soup. In this culture, you do. When you drink soup, you lift the bowl to your mouth, sip. Some quick reminders. Don't be afraid to slurp your noodles. I was just at a Japanese ramen place in the Pacific, and indeed, the best way to get the broth is to slurp noodles because they're long. You can't cut them. You only have chopsticks. So yes, you do slurp, and everyone is slurping, and it's loud. It means you enjoy it. I can't wait to get these in my mouth. It's delicious. Second you start doing it and everyone else doing it, you'll fall right into place. Okay, so in Japan, you want to go national for both cultures. You would go for a Japanese place, but also you'll probably go to a Japanese version of American cuisine. And if you ask anyone who's been to Japan, what is Christmas in Japan? It's 3 letters. It's KFC, because that's what they do for Christmas, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Likewise, by the way, just to add a little extra to this, in Austin, they probably want to see an American version of Japanese or Asian culture, such as what we see here is, oh, I forgot the name of it. We have the floating conveyor belt sushi places, and of course, something like P. Terry's. It's burgers, but with a particularly Austin tilt to them. Oh, it's Kura. That's what it's called, Kura sushi. Last thing, women in business wear dresses in subtle colors. Remember that you're going to be seen first as a foreigner and then as a female. It's okay to invite Japanese businessmen to lunch or dinner, but allow him to choose the restaurant. All the better, because he may know better where to go, because if it's in Japan. Some extra things: you can establish credibility at the beginning. Be assertive. You're asked to get coffee, you say, I'm an engineer, you know. It's hard to believe that could happen, but it could. And but even established women in Japanese culture may be expected to quit to be a mother. This happens even in the culture itself, because if you know Marie Kondo, who wrote about the joy of, you know, tidying up, she stopped out of her career to have a child, and you don't hear much of her right now. In fact, she admits that she's not very organized at the moment because she is Japanese. That's how it's done. Okay, just a few more things here, if you would. Some fun facts. India is responsible for many inventions. half the population, which now I think as of this year, if I'm not mistaken, India has replaced China as the world's most populous country. Half are under 25. And taxi drivers actually know a lot about the US. So when greeting, you shake hands, especially in big tech hub cities. You have a seat without shaking hands in some cases. Only in religious settings, we think that everyone is saying namaste, but it's more a religious thing, whereas shaking hands is more the westernized version. Sometimes in a hotel, you may be given a garland of flowers. Address with formal titles and small token gifts, including gifts from your own country, after a relationship develops. Doesn't have to be at the beginning. There's softeners in India that we haven't really looked up elsewhere, that because they kind of form their own style here, like G at the end, it's a softener. Han, G means yes, yes. G, nahi means yes, no. Actually, it's a Californian style too. If you say no, you go, yeah, no. Or if it's yes, you go, no, yeah. Okay, so men wear semi-formal attire as a dark suit. Women wear pantsuits or blouse and skirt combos. It's very westernized. It is business casual, as we see here. If it's not suits where there are no ties. And this is a shifting component worldwide, I think, when it's especially westernized wear. In the North, it's cooler, more conservative. So it's usually more formal. And in the South, where it's more industrialized, it's less formal and cooler linen. So be patient and persistent. Be ready to reschedule a meeting if the partner doesn't show. Be persistent. This is where American sort of lack of patience gets to be a problem. Present and scan a business card in English, but present it to the senior person first. QR codes are fine. Again, the QR code can be on the card. That way the person can choose to store it on their phone once they've scanned the code. Instead of no, it's more polite to say, I'll try. And also be aware of a different yes, no here, what we might call an infinity symbol here. You have to be very careful about what that means. In fact, the last one here, the back and forth bobble, acknowledgement of understanding, actually in the US means, well, I don't know, one way or the other. It's the opposite, actually, in American nonverbals, because it doesn't show understanding. It says, I kind of get it. Okay, just a few more things. So time is quite different here. You arrive later than the arranged time. We do that in the US too. If dinner's at 7, you do not show at 7. No earlier than 7:20 or 7:30. Appetizers are being served and drinks. Allow the host to serve you. Leave food on the plate instead of refusing it because it would be rude. Use just the first 3 fingers and thumb if the host also uses hands. And take from a communal dish. Of course, lazy Susans, as we saw in China, are often used. You'll see this in restaurants as well. Allow the oldest or senior to start. Make sure to wash your hands. You can say, I'm going to wash my hands before the meal. We do that too. We say, where's the restroom? Because we plan to clean. You may have maybe at a colleague's home or move to a restaurant for a more singular experience of a really nice restaurant. It's okay to ask for special dietary restrictions, and you can give reasons. Thank you for inviting me. I'm vegetarian. Because that way you're not refusing their food per se, you're refusing the type of food, because in general, wherever you are. Consider food safety, bring your own water bottle. You can buy it at a stall somewhere, in a store nearby. Keep your distance at least 2 feet. And some other, again, basics, and be very careful about what is considered clean. Okay, finally, women in business. It's a male-dominated society in India, which means accepting women in business is difficult, but note it's regional. In South and Central India and high-tech areas such as Bangalore, women have gained more acceptance as business leaders. After all, this is the largest country, and it can differ regionally. You can quickly establish position and title, but women may not be included in some conversations. Last, it's okay to invite an Indian man to business lunch and pay. Notice it's lunch, by the way. This is kind of generally true. In the middle of the day, it's limited to an hour or so, and it isn't a restaurant, so it is not considered an invitation for something else. Okay, now I know we're about to enter a question and answer. If you allow me just a moment, I'm not going to do all of this. I want to just look at what underlies a common Asian culture. We can look at two people. Edward Hall talked about high and low context cultures, and Geert Hofstede had 6 cultural dimensions. This is how we see how and why they differ. Now, just very quickly, low context means that you're very direct in what you say. High context means you rely on external features. So, for example, you're in a cab. In the US, you'd say, can you please turn on the air conditioner? But say in India, you might say it's hot. You're wiping your brow and you're saying it's hot. In other words, please turn on the air conditioner, but you don't say it directly. Low and high context cultures. Culture dimensions, a Dutch researcher found there were 6 dimensions that vary across cultures. I'm just going to cover a couple. Well, just a couple here, because the biggest ones for the US are that we're individualist rather than collectivist. We rank number 1 in the world. We're at 92 out of 100. The opposite is collectivist, where it's to families and communities. And it's the ones we saw. Look at these. It's the countries we just looked at tend to be collectivist. Whereas in the US, we say, you're special, there's no one like you. This is what we have to be careful about. We're individualist, and most Asian cultures are collectivist. And last, you can see it here on a world map. I'm going to leave you with just one more. Low power distance and high power. Low power means we're kind of all the same. You question the teacher, you question the boss. But in most Asian countries, there is still a hierarchy, and you have to be careful about pulling rank. That's it. And there's more to that. You can always read about 6 cultural dimensions, but you can see it on maps like here. Power distances. And if you're aware of that, you see it's the culture. So the bottom line is here, ladies and gentlemen, is simply that you want to put your best foot forward. If you get some of the things right, it's great. If you don't, and it's even laughable, you have to be willing to fall on your face a little, because it's the effort that counts in all of these cultures. And that's what's important. And you may not think, who cares if I take my shoes off, or if I let the host start dinner first. But it does, because it's simply showing respect. All of these things have nothing to do with their origins. It has nothing to do with eating or drinking. It has everything to do with how you are greeting someone, how you act in meetings, and how you toast and dine. And with that, I'll leave you to questions and comments, please.